Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Business of Boutique Fitness. My name is Lisi Keeker, and I am joined for the very first time with the very brilliant Alina Cooper, my darling girl.
Thank you for having me,
It is
Lise.
so nice to have you here.
Indeed, I'm super excited to be here with you today and joining you for our first podcast together.
So I have to say, can I tell the story of how we met?
You can.
This is why my episodes are much longer, and so we just teasingly told Alina that she would be the magic, and we keep me reined in. So I was speaking at Elevate
2023
and a half years ago, probably getting close to that on this one, and there was a brilliant moderator on my panel. She not only kept us all in check, she asked such insightful questions, so thoughtful. As you can guess, it was this spectacular woman across from me who has been a brilliant studio owner, a leader in the UK when it comes to fitness and wellness. And the fact of the matter is, when we sat down afterwards, I figured we were going to not just be great friends, we were going to do some amazing things together. And we have done this for a number of years.
Yeah, absolutely. What, two years almost now?
Yep. So just so y'all know, Alina is the director of Start Your Studio Profitably. It is one of these programs that I think I'm so innately proud of. She takes studios all over the world with a brilliant team, one of whom, Matt, is sitting right in the other room right now doing all kinds of goodness. And she helps open them profitably. I guess it's the simplest way to say this. But watching the work that y'all's team has done, watching the work that you have done, it's just been so much fun to watch. So I'm thrilled to talk not about opening studios profitably, but really getting into the warning signs. Like, how do you turn your studio around? We started Start Your Studio Profitably, I think in large part because we were seeing a lot of studios that came to us and said, it feels like it's almost too late. You, on the flip side, have a lot of experience in knowing, hey, there can be turnarounds. We know the sooner those turnarounds happen, the better off you are. But let's dive deep into the warning signs and what to do to really flip the script when all of these things are going. So what do we know about struggling studios these days?
It's something we're seeing, sadly, more and more and more. I think the reality is, according to one of the latest studies in 2024, 25% of boutique fitness studios in the US reported a decline in revenue. And we know only 1 in 10 is sustainably profitable. And as you mentioned already, that was one of the foundations for the SYSP program. It enables us to preempt some of those mistakes that studio owners often make, to set them up for success from day one. And I think ultimately, yes, that's the ideal, but it's not too late. If you are noticing a decline in those numbers, if you are seeing challenges in your business, what we'll hopefully cover today in this podcast is, firstly, how to spot some of those warning signs before it's too late, but secondly, what to do if you are spotting some of those signs. And it's not all doom and gloom. We've seen so many success stories where they've turned around, through the GYSP, the Grow Your Studio Profitably program has got some incredible success stories. And I think it comes down to taking your head out of the sand. It comes down to kind of moving above the line and actually realizing that there's a problem. And actually in one of the other podcasts that we've recorded, we talk a lot about that. We talk about the Oz principle and seeing it, owning it, solving it, doing it. And that's a big part of this. If you can't see the problem, you can't do anything about it. So hopefully we will be able to, by the end of this episode, share some useful tips on how to see it, but then most importantly, how to solve it.
Let me just start for just one thing before we look at warning signs. You hit on a point that I think it's one of the most prevalent issues that entrepreneurs have, is that we like to stick our heads in the sand when we know something is going wrong. It's as if warning signs and red flags, metrics that are just a hair off, rather than making us like stand up and go, whoa, we've got to fix this, it's like we just very gently turn away from them. So from a mindset perspective, I think it's easy for people to look at this and just say it's easier to ignore that. We've both run relatively large companies on this one. What's the mindset you have to get into to, one, be willing to see these things, and to two, be willing to change them?
I think there's 2 factors to it. I think as a leader, you should have a high level of emotional intelligence. And sadly, we don't necessarily see that. And a big part of emotional intelligence is the self-awareness domain of that. And the self-awareness is really being able to recognize, to understand and manage your own emotions. But also the bigger part of emotional intelligence is also being able to recognize that in others. It's being able to manage those relationships, those emotions. And for me, self-awareness ties in really closely with then moving into the accountability side of things. And if you ask people and you look at some of the relevant studies, 95% of people state that they think they have a high level of self-awareness. The reality when these studies have been done is that it's between 10 to 20%. So as I've mentioned in one of the other episodes, 80% of people are lying to themselves daily. And they're lying to themselves about lying to themselves. And there's a great TED Talk on this exact topic. And I think the first thing that leaders have to work on in any industry, but even more importantly in boutique fitness, when our business is about people, is actually really focusing on increasing your self-awareness. And there's some daily practices. There's really simple steps you can do to become more self-aware. And I know we were talking about fiction earlier. Reading fiction books is actually proven to increase your self-awareness and your emotional intelligence. And, that's one very small thing. But I think the first step is being aware enough to realize that there's problems. And that's a real mindset shift. And actually truly being aware, not just thinking you're aware. And self-awareness changes depending on what emotional state you're in. If you are really content, really happy, you've limited stress that day, you might well have a much higher level of self-awareness. But if you're stressed, you're under pressure, you're overstimulated, your self-awareness will decrease. Your emotional intelligence will decrease. The way you react to situations will change. You won't potentially have your most productive conversations with your team. Yeah. You might answer with frustration in haste. So I think that's the first element. And there's a real mindset piece around becoming truly self-aware. Yeah. And it's something that we all have to work on continuously. The other side of it for me, and it's a real favorite topic of mine, is accountability. And this impacts everything you do in your business. And the one book I recommend for anybody to read, no matter whether they're a manager, front desk, CEO of a business, is the Oz Principle. And it's a really easy read. Audiobook's a couple of hours, but it has some really simple takeaways that really resonated with me personally. And the whole concept and premise is that it's based on the Wizard of Oz. So Dorothy and her friends, they all possess the skills and the knowledge they have. What they aren't doing is seeing what the issues are, taking ownership and accountability and doing something with it. So it's the whole concept around accountability is the road, the yellow brick road. And the way the Oz Principle works is that you have above the line and below the line thinking. Below the line thinking is, as you mentioned, putting your head in the sand. And we see this happening so much. We do it in our personal lives, we do it in our professional lives, and we certainly see studio owners doing this fairly regularly, whether it be not wanting to know the numbers, not wanting to actually face the reality of an issue they may have with a staff member. And other below the line kind of things we see are blaming other people or blaming other situations. So it's not my fault, it's happened because of X, Y, Z. We see it when they go into denial. It's not happening. So there's lots of different factors here, but blame, denial, head in the sand are quite common traits. And hands up, we've all been there.
I think it's a natural thing to also recognize that that's a step in the journey.
Absolutely.
The question is are you going to move to the next step, which is going to actually,
And that's the big thing. Are you aware enough to go from below that line thinking to above the line? And the way they break down within this book is that there's 4 key stages. First of all, you have to see it. So this is the perfect example in this topic here. You have to see the issue, truly see the issue, whether that be through reflection, analyzing the data, speaking with people, getting feedback. But until you really truly see the reality of the situation, you can't move forwards. Yeah. Once you've seen it, you've got to own it. And that owning piece is really taking accountability, taking ownership over the role you play. Yeah. And I shared an example with Heather earlier actually today around that own it piece. And we often see it. I had it with one of my businesses. One of my managers was absolutely below the line, head in the sand, blaming other people. He wasn't hitting his numbers. It was always someone else's fault. There was external factors. And there were some external factors, I'll give him that. But actually, he was in the mindset of, why is this happening to me? rather than thinking about what can I do to get through this. And the people around him, his fellow club managers, other support within the business, were ultimately blaming him. Yeah. It was his shortfall as to why this hadn't happened. And we actually had to go through this process in my business recently where we sat with the relevant people and we went through this exercise of them all really seeing the reality of how this was going to impact our business down the line and the cash flow implications this had in this particular instance, owning the role they played. And whilst they may not be the person that's directly responsible for achieving that goal, we are one company, one team with one shared goal, one shared vision, shared values, and each of us plays a role in. Until they accepted what their role was, again, we can't move forward. Then you solve it. You find the solution. It's simple. Instead of thinking, why is this happening? What can I do? So it's that shift from why to what. And then doing it. Simple. Like again, I say simple, but you've got a plan, follow through. The biggest thing I've had conversations with people about is I regret doing that. And for me, I never want to be in a position where I say, oh, I wish I'd done that better. I wish I'd made that extra phone call. I wish I'd cut that cost. I wish I'd done this. So actually get on with it and do it. Get your hands dirty, solve the problem, and then implement those changes, because not only will it be hugely impactful to your business, but also it sets a precedent in your business that you are willing to do what's needed to make this work. And that for me is that mindset piece, is really shifting. We all fall below the line. We'll all have days where we're like, oh, I just don't want to deal with this today, or denial. But actually it's the self-awareness element, and that's how the two tie in together. If you're aware enough to realize you're operating below the line, you've then got an opportunity
to step above. Can we just go back to 1 sec on step 1? Because I find that for many entrepreneurs, one of the biggest issues is they never take the time for step 1, which was to know that there's a problem. They literally hit this point where they look at this and they say, whoa, I have not taken the time to analyze the data. I have not taken the time to reflect on this. I've not taken the time to have some hard conversations. And all of these are things that I have found over the years. One, when you practice them, they get a whole lot easier. But that very first time are remarkably intimidating. To call the client who left a bad review, to call the client who said I had a problem in this class or I had a problem with this instructor, to look at all of the data, which is overwhelming on this. And finally, to get to a place where, you really say, I'm willing to actually dive into this. So if you were looking at somebody who says, gosh, this sounds great. I've never even taken the time for this. I don't even have the time for this. What would you say to them?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think there's a couple of layers to that. I think the first thing, especially around the not having the time to do it, they've got to make the time. It's not an option. If their business is at the stage where they think it's failing and that they genuinely are still passionate about this business and they want to turn it around, I think it's simple. If you really want to turn that business around, you haven't got a choice. You've got to find the time to do those things. And there's obviously certain ways we can coach them through that with regards to, things like time management, prioritizing tasks. There's lots of models that look at how we prioritize tasks. And I certainly see it with a lot of the leaders that I work with. They don't have a way of prioritizing the things that are coming at them. And when it's like that, it can be really overwhelming. We've all felt that day of, oh my God, there's so many things on my to-do list. Yeah. What do I focus on? Yeah. And I always revert back to the urgent, important, urgent, not important.
The Eisenhower matrix.
So simple. And, if you're not aware of the Eisenhower matrix, pop it into ChatGPT, Google it. It's brilliant.
So
it's
helpful.
So simple, so helpful. And even still today now, when I'm in those moments of overwhelm, when I'm looking at that to-do list and thinking, where do I begin? I reflect back on that. And that was something that I learned in my career probably 25 years ago. But it really helps you categorize tasks. And if those tasks shouldn't be on your to-do list, park them. And that for me, for the CEOs of these businesses, these studio owners, is actually a really critical thing, is identifying what can you take off your plate. And simplifying that even further is this task you're doing right now driving your business forward? If it's not making you more money or saving you money, suck it off right now. Because if your business is in that much of a position where
it's not going to matter.
Absolutely. And it's scary. It can be really hard for a lot of people to face the reality, especially when this has been their passion. It's their baby. No one wants to fail. And I think that's where we need to flip the script of the language. There is a very different, we all have failures as such.
I mean, we're humans.
Absolutely.
I mean, like, this is like the one thing tying us all together is that we are going to make mistakes. We are going to have
100%.
failures. We're going to have all of those things.
Yeah. And I think as you know, been through, we've all had those things in our career where it hasn't gone quite to plan. Businesses have had, we've had COVID, we've had
go down the list.
Financial crises. We've had so many things that we weren't necessarily expecting.
Yeah.
But we've had to pivot, we've had to adapt, we've had to take steps back sometimes. We've had to, I've closed a business. And that's a horrible thing to do. And it's, a very difficult decision. But sometimes you have to make that call. There's, it does come to that. But I think in this side of things, we're not at the stage where we're having to close the business. But that may be an eventuality if you don't make these changes.
Yeah, I think there's something really powerful to recognize. And we've said this with a few long-term friends who are in different industries that have come to us when they realized, oh my gosh, there's a problem. And I think it was a really hard thing that my advice to them from a time management perspective was to literally walk away for 5 days and just figure out where the problems actually were. And it was a very hard thing where they said, you want me to walk away? Like, we're struggling, we're this, we're that. And I'm like, you just need to trust me. You need to go to somebody's guest bedroom. You need to go to your parents' home. You need to go to X, Y, and Z. You need to lock yourself away, probably for a minimum of 3 days, but I've normally recommended 5. And you need to go through every single number. You need to dig through absolutely, we call them post-mortems, but the post-mortems of your marketing, of how your clients are utilizing your studio, of what's happening inside of your social media, what's happening inside of your team. You need to dig through all of this. You need to book calls with as many people as you can and ask as many questions, because trust me, like those 5 days, your studio will not close because of those 5 days. Those 5 days are why your studio may stay open for the long term. And sometimes it's as simple as saying, I'm not even going to deal with the time management piece today. All I'm going to deal with is I must have the time to start on that. Because if you don't have the time for this, I'm with you. You're not going to have a studio in just a few months. And that's a much harder conversation. That's a much harder thing to deal with than, hey, I didn't just take the time to like go deep and figure out where this is. So knowing all of this, let's go ahead and start with just warning signs, red flags, where you see this is, because these really are the things that should give you an idea that there is a problem early on.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some really simple ones. If you're tracking the key basic metrics, and actually Heather and I talk about that in another podcast episode, looking at stripping it really back and thinking about the key metrics. Yes, there's lots we'd love you to track, but actually start simple. But we're looking at our revenue and our profit. That's obviously a big part of it. But ultimately, if you're seeing a consistent decline in your revenue outside of the seasonal trends that you'd expect, you've got a problem. If you're seeing a decline in class attendance, again, if it's an expected one, it's the middle of the summer, it might be December, don't panic. But if you're seeing that in one of your peak times, where you would normally be seeing waiting lists, you've got an issue. If you're seeing a drop in your recurring memberships, you're seeing an increased churn rate, you're seeing more cancellations, again, outside of any seasonal fluctuations. And I think that comes down to knowing what is the norm for your business, because you can't spot these trends unless you know what the base starting point is. So I think, there's some real tangible ones that you can track, but then there's also some non-tangible ones. You've got an increase in bad reviews. You've got negative customer feedback coming through. You've got an unhappy team. Your instructors are burnt out. And they're early warning signs that a lot of people don't acknowledge. And it takes a while before they have a hit on the bottom line. But actually, sometimes they're the first signs that something's not quite right. Your instructors are burnt out. Your team are leaving your business.
Yep.
That's going to have a knock-on effect. Your client's going to leave.
Absolutely.
And these are all small factors that, again, coming back to that self-awareness
They
piece,
add up enormously.
If you're aware enough to see that happening right at the start, rather than blaming or thinking or just denying it altogether, you're going to catch that a lot earlier. When it comes to impacting your revenue and profit, you've let it go too long.
Yep.
It shouldn't have got to that stage for you to recognize that there was an issue.
I think when we oftentimes see studio owners in this point, there's an emotional drain at this point. They have recognized that there's a problem, and we'll hear things like, "I'm in a prison. I don't see any way out. I am trapped by this business." By the way, I'm going to argue there's some other things. If you haven't taken a vacation in the last 6 months, if you couldn't walk away from your studio for the next week and have your studio continue on along growing without any massive fires when you come back, if you are the only substitute that is called on the regular and no one else is there, like, these are all things that should tell you, whoa, there may not be a chance that you're moving towards closing your studio, but you are certainly moving in the direction of an underperforming studio. And guys, I don't think if you're listening to this, you're probably not looking for an underperforming studio or looking for an overperforming studio. So if you're feeling this moment, those are going to lead to burnout probably faster than anything else. If you're taking if you're taking the majority, the brunt of what it means to own a business, and you have a team around you, there's some other issues that we know you can readily solve.
And what does burnout look like to you, Lise? Because I think different people have a different perception of what burnout is, and some people wait till they get to that point where they physically and emotionally break.
Yeah.
But actually, there's earlier warning signs. So what does that look like for you?
Yeah. So first of all, for me personally, if I am dealing with regular bouts of anxiety, that is a sign that I'm moving towards burnout. If I can't decompress or turn off, now I'm definitely someone with ADHD, here we go on this one. And so I'm somebody who's like, whoa, if I can't turn off at night, if I can't turn off on a day off, if I can't get home with my children and let go of what's happening at work, that's a sign that whether I'm overperforming or underperforming, I'm heading towards burnout on where this is. Additionally, I think a mental state, the moment when I realize I am angry about going to work, I don't know any other way to say this, frustrated, angry, I'm viewing my studio, I'm viewing what I do as something that is holding me back. That's a sign that I'm on that path. And those are my early signs where I kind of have to take a deep breath. And I got to say, I have a very emotionally aware husband, and I'm the daughter of a psychotherapist, and my father, who he probably would kill me for saying this, is remarkably emotionally we're human on where this is. In spite of the fact that every so often I'm like, oh my gosh, you're my father. You're such an imbecile on some things. It's only we can say over our fathers that we love. Those are people around me that I've really requested to say, tell me when you see things that I'm not going to see. And I'm really grateful that we've got some people that are pretty close to me that are like, hey, just wanted to tell you that I'm seeing this. They become a part of the emotional awareness piece. And because I do think other people, even if you're very self-aware, other people tend to see the very earliest signs before you do.
Absolutely. And I think that ties in with having the confidence to ask for feedback. Yeah. And so many people have been potentially taught or read about how to give feedback, but very few people have actually focused on how to receive feedback. Yeah. And I think it's a skill. It shouldn't be as hard as we make it out to be. It should be something we embrace. It should be something that, like you said, you have that opportunity to ask them and be able to openly get their feedback and accept that. And I think that's a really key part of this is we should be doing this every day in our businesses. We should have that culture of feedback. You should be able to feel like you can ask for feedback from above, below, sideways. It should be something we're nurturing in our businesses. And it takes time to create that culture and that psychological safety and the trust within your business that people feel they can tell you the truth, especially people like whether if you're the studio owner, your studio manager, your front of house staff, your instructors will probably have some trepidation around giving you honest feedback.
I think we're terrified normally of going up on where absolutely. This is. That's the hardest person to provide feedback to. And especially because in many organizations, that is so strongly discouraged. That's something where it's like, is my job going to be at risk? Am I going to be dealing with an angry boss that I'm going to have to be going through on this? By the way, if you have an angry boss for giving very appropriate feedback, you have an unhealthy boss. I think that's a very critical thing to recognize on this. Knowing all of this, what is your version of burnout? All right, y'all. We went so crazy on this episode. We decided to make an episode 1, 2, and 3. Alina, you are just remarkable on this one. I feel like I'm inspired as we're getting through this. So guys, just know that there's so much waiting for you on this one. So we're wrapping episode 1 right now. If you have watched this, if you have listened to this, please be sure to like this episode, follow on along with us, share this with a fellow studio owner, and of course, leave us a comment and let us know how this has impacted your business.